The luxury car sat in the middle of the dealership like a dead giant. Mechanics had tried everything. Engineers had walked away, shaking their heads. Even the CEO himself called the engine a complete loss. But what nobody expected was that a struggling single father with grease on his hands and bills, piling up at home, would bring the impossible machine back to life in just one night. And when the sun rose the next morning, the entire city stood frozen in shock at what he had done. Stay until the end, because this story proves that sometimes the people the world ignores are the ones capable of miracles. And before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Kind Soul Stories for more emotional and inspiring stories that touch the heart. Rain poured heavily across the city as Ethan Cole tightened the last bolt under the hood of an old pickup truck inside his tiny repair garage. The roof leaked in 3 different places, forcing rusty buckets to catch dripping water, while the cold wind pushed through cracks in the walls. The flickering fluorescent light above him buzzed constantly, making the small garage feel even more lifeless. Ethan wiped grease from his forehead and checked the clock hanging near the office door. It was nearly 9 p.m. Another exhausting day was ending. Yet he still hadn't earned enough money to cover this month's rent. His back ached from working non-stop, but the thought of his 8-year-old daughter, Lily, waiting at home kept him moving. Ever since his wife passed away 3 years earlier, Ethan had become both mother and father to his little girl. Every morning he packed her school lunch. Every night he helped her with homework, while pretending not to notice the overdue bills stacked beside the microwave. Life had become painfully difficult, but Ethan refused to let Lily see him break. To her, he still wanted to be a hero. After closing the garage, Ethan drove across town delivering old mechanical parts to Blackridge Motors, the most luxurious dealership in the city. The massive glass building looked like another world compared to Ethan's struggling life. Expensive sports cars gleamed under bright showroom lights while wealthy customers walked around in designer suits. As Ethan unloaded the parts near the service department, loud arguing suddenly echoed through the garage area. Curious, Ethan glanced toward a group of mechanics gathered around a sleek, black prototype sports car. The vehicle looked stunning, but its engine compartment lay completely dismantled. Frustration covered every mechanic's face. One employee angrily kicked a toolbox, while another muttered that the engine was finished forever. Ethan quietly stepped closer, studying the damaged machine from a distance. Even without touching it, something felt wrong to him. Years of experience repairing forgotten. Vehicles had trained his instincts differently from textbook engineers. He noticed unusual burn marks near the fuel system and a strange smell lingering around the engine bay. What happened to it? Ethan asked carefully. One mechanic laughed mockingly. "Doesn't matter anymore," he replied. "Our best experts already failed." Another looked Ethan up and down at his cheap clothes and worn boots before smirking. "This isn't junkyard work, buddy." Ethan ignored the insults and kept observing the engine silently. Just then, billionaire CEO Victor Langston stormed into the garage with anger burning in his eyes. "I'm done wasting time," he snapped. "Scrap the car tomorrow morning." Everyone fell silent immediately. Ethan stared at the damaged engine one more time before quietly saying words that made the entire room freeze. "Give me one night with it, and I think I can fix it." The entire garage exploded with laughter the moment Ethan offered to repair the prototype. Some mechanics shook their heads while others exchanged amused looks, unable to believe that a struggling, small-town mechanic thought he could succeed where millionaire engineers had failed. Victor Langston stared at Ethan for several long seconds, his expression cold and unreadable. The billionaire CEO was exhausted, humiliated, and dangerously close to losing one of the biggest business deals of his career. For weeks, his expert team had worked non-stop trying to revive the engine, yet every attempt ended in disaster. Investors were already pulling away from the company, and tomorrow morning, the prototype was scheduled to be destroyed to avoid further embarrassment. Ethan could feel everyone watching him, silently waiting for Victor to throw him out of the building. But instead, the CEO slowly pulled the car keys from his pocket and tossed them across the workbench. "One night," Victor said sharply. "That's all you get." The employees immediately protested, warning Victor that this was ridiculous. But he silenced them with one look. Deep down, Victor no longer believed the car could be fixed anyway. As midnight approached, the dealership emptied until only Ethan remained inside the massive service garage. Rain hammered against the giant glass windows while thunder echoed outside like distant explosions. Ethan rolled up his sleeves, opened the engine compartment fully, and began examining every detail with complete focus. Unlike the dealership mechanics who relied heavily on computer diagnostics, Ethan trusted his instincts first. He carefully touched damaged wires, listened to faint mechanical sounds, and studied every inch of the burned engine. Hours passed slowly. Grease covered his hands and face while exhaustion weighed heavily on his body, but he refused to stop. Around midnight, his phone vibrated. It was Lily calling from home. Her sleepy little voice instantly softened Ethan's tired expression. "Daddy, are you still working?" she asked quietly. Ethan leaned against the workbench for a moment, fighting his exhaustion. "Yeah, sweetheart," he whispered gently. "I'm fixing something important tonight." Lily smiled. Through the phone, "You always fix things." Those words hit Ethan deeply because nobody else in the world believed in him anymore except his daughter. After hanging up, Ethan returned to the engine with renewed determination. Then suddenly, while dismantling the lower fuel assembly manually, he noticed something hidden. Beneath a layer of damaged metal, a tiny crack barely visible to the eye. Ethan immediately realized this was the real problem. Under extreme heat pressure, the crack caused fuel instability that destroyed the engine system completely. The dealership engineers missed it because computer scans never detected the flaw. Ethan worked furiously through the rest of the night, rebuilding the damaged section, piece by piece. Finally, just before sunrise, he sat nervously in the driver's seat and turned the ignition key. For one terrifying second, silence filled the garage. Then the engine roared to life with breathtaking power, shaking the entire building as Ethan stared forward in stunned disbelief with tears slowly filling his eyes. By sunrise, the entire dealership had turned into complete chaos. Mechanics who once mocked Ethan now stood speechless around the fully restored prototype. As the powerful engine echoed through the massive garage, employees rushed to record videos, while managers called investors with excitement returning to their voices for the first time in weeks. Victor Langston walked slowly toward the car, unable to hide the disbelief written across his face. Just hours earlier, he had accepted the engine's death as a financial disaster beyond repair. Yet somehow, the quiet single father everyone ignored had achieved what an entire team of elite engineers could not. Ethan stepped away from the vehicle, exhausted and covered in grease, his eyes red from working through the entire night without rest. For a moment, nobody spoke. The sound of the engine alone filled the silence, like proof of a miracle standing directly in front of them. Victor finally looked at Ethan and asked the question everyone wanted answered. "How did you do it?" Ethan glanced back at the engine calmly before replying, "Because I listened to the machine instead of my pride." The words hit the room harder than anyone expected. Later that afternoon, Victor invited Ethan into his luxurious office overlooking the city skyline. The office was filled with expensive furniture, framed awards, and giant glass windows. But despite all the wealth surrounding him, Victor looked strangely empty sitting behind his desk. He offered Ethan a position at Blackridge Motors, immediately along with a salary Ethan had never imagined earning in his life. Any mechanic would have accepted instantly without hesitation. But Ethan remained quiet for several seconds, surprising Victor. The CEO frowned slightly. "You don't seem excited," he said. Ethan lowered his eyes for a moment before answering honestly. "I spent years chasing money once. Then life taught me something harder." Victor leaned back silently as Ethan continued speaking about losing his wife, raising Lily alone, and working endless nights just to survive. He admitted there were nights he cried after. Lily fell asleep because he didn't know how to keep going anymore. But every morning his daughter still looked at him like he was capable of anything. "That's why I fixed your engine," Ethan said softly. "Not because I'm special, because when life breaks you completely, You learn how to keep rebuilding. Victor listened carefully, his expression slowly changing. For the first time in years, someone was speaking to him without fear, money or selfish ambition. Ethan's words forced the billionaire to confront the truth about his own lonely life. He had built a powerful empire, but destroyed relationships along the way. His marriage had failed. His son barely answered his calls anymore. Deep inside, Victor realized he admired Ethan more than any wealthy businessman he had ever met. Before Ethan left the office, Victor stopped him near the door and quietly said something nobody expected from a man like him. "You didn't just save my car tonight," he admitted softly. "You reminded me what kind of man I used to want to become." The story of Ethan Cole spread across the city faster than anyone imagined. News channels called him the mechanic who performed a miracle, while social media filled with videos of the dead prototype roaring back to life after one impossible night. But despite the sudden fame, Ethan's life remained surprisingly simple. Every evening after work at Blackridge Motors, he still returned home to the same small apartment where Lily waited excitedly by the door every night. No matter how busy his new position became, Ethan never stopped being a father first. They still shared cheap dinners together, laughed over homework at the kitchen table, and watched old movies on the worn-out couch that Ethan had promised to replace someday. For the first time in years, however, peace slowly entered their lives. Bills were finally paid on time. The refrigerator stayed full. Lily smiled more often because she no longer overheard her father worrying late at night. Meanwhile, Blackridge Motors itself began changing in ways nobody expected. Victor Langston transformed completely after meeting Ethan. Employees who once feared walking near the CEO. As office noticed, he no longer shouted at workers over small mistakes. Young mechanics were finally given opportunities to learn instead of being humiliated publicly. Victor even started rebuilding the broken relationship with his estranged son, something he had avoided for years because pride mattered more to him than family. Ethan's influence reminded him that success meant nothing if you lost yourself along the way. Several months later, Ethan received heartbreaking news that the tiny, run-down garage where he once worked was shutting down permanently. The elderly owner could no longer afford rent or repairs. Standing inside the leaking building one last time, Ethan remembered all the painful nights he spent there fighting to survive after losing his wife. That garage had been ugly, cold, and forgotten by the world. But it had also kept him alive during the darkest period of his life. A few weeks later, Ethan surprised the entire city again. Instead of buying luxury cars or a giant mansion with his new income, he purchased the old garage building himself. But he didn't reopen it for profit. Instead, Ethan transformed the place into a free training workshop for struggling mechanics, single parents, and young people who needed a second chance in life. Word spread quickly, and soon the once-forgotten garage became filled with people learning, rebuilding, and believing in themselves again. During the grand opening ceremony, reporters asked Victor Langston why he trusted Ethan so deeply after only one night. The billionaire smiled quietly before answering, "Because the world gave up on him first, and he still chose kindness." Ethan looked around the crowded workshop at smiling faces, hardworking hands, and Lily standing proudly beside him. In that moment, he realized the greatest thing he ever repaired was never the engine at all. It was hope inside broken people, who simply needed someone to believe in them. One more time, if this story touched your heart, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Kind Soul Stories for more emotional stories that inspire kindness, strength, and second chances.